Those of you who are familiar with Owen Wister's Lynn McLean and the Virginian will have learned something of the true nature of the cowboy, and that, despite his rough exterior, he is capable of loyal friendship and deeds of valor. It was at Fort Washakie in Wyoming that I first had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Wister. It was on the edge of that same reservation that my friend Mr. J.K. Moore had the roundup at which a certain famous cowboy figured conspicuously. This man had come from Texas, not voluntarily, but because the climate had become too warm for him. He had killed several men in a drinking row in that state. The Texan, for thus we shall designate him, had changed his name so that his identity might be lost, and had apprised only his immediate friends at home of this fact. During a long stage ride towards the north, a drummer, a particular friend of mine, and two cowpunchers returning from Texas were among the passengers. The cowboys happened to learn that my friend was on his way to a large supply store where they knew the Texan did his trading. Feeling entire confidence in the drummer, they entrusted to his care a letter for the Texan, which some dear one at home had given them rather than run the risk of sending it through the mail. On arriving at his destination, my friend made inquiries as to the whereabouts of the Texan, and learned that he had just come in from the roundup and was on a spree, terrorizing all who came in contact with him. When the drummer ascertained the reputation of the man whom he was seeking, he discreetly bided his time until the Texan had sobered off. He then handed him the letter. It was evident that the Texan was overjoyed to receive the news from home, and, after eagerly devouring it, turned to my friend and said, "Runner, how in the hell did you know where to find me?" The drummer replied that he did not know, but had been looking for him for several days, that he had received the most explicit instructions not to part with the letter until he could deliver it personally, and failing to find him, he was to mail it to a certain address in San Antonio, Texas. Well, stranger, you have made a friend forever of the very meanest cowpuncher in Wyoming, but it's worth standing twixt you and a bullet to get this letter. The two parted, neither, perhaps, thinking any more of the incident. A year passed, and a busy land office had been established just across the Wyoming line in the state of Nebraska. The drummer was called there on business. As is always the case in such a motley frontier gathering, many unscrupulous characters had crowded in to prey upon the unsuspecting tenderfoot. Men of this type always wore the outward symbols of the cowpuncher and conspicuously displayed their 44 revolvers. It was the time of a great roundup, and the company store was full of cowboys. In this gathering, the drummer was surprised to encounter the meanest cowpuncher in Wyoming, as the Texan had styled himself. A cordial greeting passed between them, and the Texan expressed much delight in seeing his benefactor again, and then passed to the other end of the store. My friend was selling a line of hats, and happened to put on a white derby from his box of samples. Immediately, one of these would-be bad men of the tin horn variety, in a loud voice, accosted him. "Say, stranger, don't you know you are transgressing one of our unwritten laws? That hat of yours can't stand this climate unless we let a little air in it." At the same time, he suggestively tapped the pistol at his belt. A crowd promptly gathered to see the fun. This was the opportunity the Texan had sought to prove his heartfelt gratitude to the man who had befriended him. With vulture-like veracity, he seized it. Advancing towards my friend, he said, "Say, Mr. Runner, did you know that we have imported the best backstepper in the States, and this is him?" I know you want to see him dance." Drawing his .38, he ordered the officious bully to begin. The Texan was no stranger to him, and he lost no time in obeying. The frail structure of the store fairly shook, and a few canned goods dropped from the shelves, but the enjoyment was too evident on all sides to allow the sport to be discontinued. Utterly worn out, time and again the victim, with his two .44s dangling uselessly at his sides, gave his tormentor a dog-like look of appeal, but no mercy was shown him, and he was ordered to keep it up. At last my friend begged that the poor fellow be allowed to rest. "Only on one condition," said the Texan, addressing the dancer. "You either leave these diggings tonight, or I'll make a ring out here in front of this store tomorrow morning, and let this man that you have insulted beat hell out of you." The drummer, unaccustomed to battle in the arena, was greatly relieved the next morning to find the bully had fled. That night the drummer was destined to witness a still more painful exhibition of the Texan's cool and relentless mastery of a dangerous situation. There was to be a cowboy dance in which all the rough element of that frontier community was expected to participate. The cowboy insisted upon taking his new friend with him, assuring the drummer when he appeared reluctant that it would be a sight worth seeing and that he would get him safely through. They went together. All progressed smoothly until about midnight, when the dance was in full swing and the Texan had distinguished himself by his grace and abandon as a dancer. Suddenly an excited man rushed into the hall and, seizing the Texan by the arm, cried out, "Big Steve is on a drunk and is coming. He's here already. You'll have to be quick." The Texan barely had time to throw aside the girl with whom he was dancing and to draw his six-shooter when there was a commotion among the crowd at the other end of the hall, and there appeared at the doorway a dust-covered man and horse. It was Big Steve, the Texan's well-known enemy, whom he had vowed to shoot on sight. To the consternation of the dancers, the big man rode his bronco straight through their midst to the center of the hall, evidently seeking his foe. But, quick as a flash, before he had time to single out the object of his search, the Texan had taken careful aim and fired. For an instant a red spot appeared in Big Steve's forehead. He reeled in his saddle and fell from his horse, dead. There was no further excitement. The dance broke up, the guests scattering to their homes. No effort was made to bring the Texan to justice. The deadly feud between these two men had become notorious, and it was generally understood that one of them must die. The survivor in this mortal combat bade the drummer good-bye as if nothing had happened, and before morning dawned had ridden quietly out of the town. When next I heard of the Texan, he was the trusted agent of the cattlemen, who had organized to rid the country of the thieves with which Wyoming was so grievously afflicted, the cow-puncher's wide acquaintance among men of his own class, the respectful awe with which he was regarded by them, his rare knowledge of human nature, and his unswerving loyalty to the righteous cause which he represented, made his services indispensable as a leader in that memorable crisis of the cattle industry of the state. Such was the type of man who won the admiration and respect of a people who worshipped personal loyalty and physical courage. And indeed, there was in the man's soul a genuine spark of true nobility. In his dealings with his friends, he reached a higher standard of honor than is common among men, and he was never known to break his word.